Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ignition News, your unfiltered news source for everything you need to know to stay up to date with news happening in the United States of America, around the world, and in your backyard. But this is not a show for spectators, okay? If you haven't done one good thing for someone today, why don't you stop the podcast, go do something good, and come on back? We've got a lot of stories today, even though it is a slower news day. Got a lot of things I want to make sure that you're updated on, make sure that you are aware of. We talked about that, so let's get into the news. Before we do that, I do want to let you know, if you're new to the show, you can find us at theignition.news. That's theignition.news. You can learn all about where we are, all the platforms we're on, Substack, Spotify, wherever we are. We're there. So we did officially move the podcast over to the Spotify platform today, but it'll still distribute over to all of your favorite platforms for you to catch up on the show. We tried to keep it on Substack, but I got to tell you, Substack is just not very friendly to podcast creators or fans. So the show will still be on Substack, but we are moving the hosting over to Spotify just because it allows us to get to more people. That's just the reality of the situation. But if you don't like Spotify, you can get the podcast on YouTube. You can get the podcast or the news updates on Apple and, of course, Substack. So let's go ahead and get rocking and rolling. Special thanks to the crew on our TikTok Live. We live stream the show on TikTok. And I wanted to say hi to everyone over there on TikTok and to our awesome moderators who help keep the show running so I don't have to worry about people saying horrible things during the show. So we talked about Kiev yesterday. We talked about the Ukraine peace situation. Let's get into some updates there. Let's actually start with what happened in Kiev yesterday because it really tells you everything you need to know about how authoritarian regimes negotiate. So as you know from yesterday, Zelensky's on his way to meet with Trump to discuss peace terms. And while they were doing that, Russia launched one of the most brutal attacks on the history of the entire war. So what we know so far is over 500 drones, over 40 missiles, and that caused a lot of devastation in Ukraine's capital. Think about that. 500 drones, 40 missiles on the day before the peace deal. Absolutely devastating, not acting in good faith, and no admonition that I've seen from the United States government. Despicable. So far, we know that 2 people are dead and 44 people are wounded. A third of Kiev, has no heat. And it is December. It's freezing there. So imagine being freezing. Your leader is on the way to negotiate for peace on your behalf, and the enemy has attacked you with drones and warfare in the middle of winter. Our thoughts are obviously with the people of Ukraine. Here on the show, we're longtime supporters. We believe that we need to end this conflict. The United States needs to continue to step it up. Zelensky called it exactly what it is. He said, this attack is Russia's answer to our peace efforts. I mean, that kind of says it right there. It's not a military response. It's not a strategic strike. It's an answer to the idea of peace itself. So as Zelensky's in the air headed to Florida, that's what happened. And, this is what we talk about when we talk about authoritarian regimes. They do not negotiate in good faith. America, this is a lesson for you, I think. They negotiate from a position of maximum violence. Every time there's a peace meeting, every time there's a summit, every time there's a chance for de-escalation, Putin escalates. It's a pattern. This is not an accident. This is not the first time we've heard about this happening, and it deserves broad condemnation. Again, this is not an accident. On the eve of peace, 500 drones, 40 missiles, and Zelensky, a hero, on his flight still to negotiate peace on behalf of his people, a real leader. Wouldn't it be nice to have a real leader of your country willing to put everything on the line for you to keep your family safe in the dead of winter? Our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. As we move on to the next story, I just want to say welcome to everybody watching on the live. And if it's your first time catching the daily news updates, I want to let you know that we launched the Ignition News to give you daily updates on important stories without filters to that information. We know that American media is becoming captured. So we have to carve out what we can in the spaces that we can to give you the information and, yes, the commentary. We do have a bias on the show, and that bias is called the truth. So thanks for following. It's good to have you. Our next story, speaking, by the way, of this, is Brazil. Who knows what happened in Brazil? Does anyone remember what happened in Brazil? Actual consequences for an attempted coup. Brazil's Supreme Court just ordered house arrest for 10 officials from Jair Bolsonaro's government who participated in a plot to keep him in power after he lost the 2022 election. These are not minor party official, by the way. We're talking about his former advisor on international affairs, for example. Okay. And so if you're not really aware of what happened in Brazil, Boy, is it a contrast to what happened in America. Let me tell you what happened. So, Brazil had an election. Jair Bolsonaro lost the election. He did not accept the fact that he lost the election. So, he and his people planned a coup. The coup failed. Bolsonaro got sentenced to 27 years in September. And he got 27-year sentence. Okay. And now all the little government gnomes of his are they are getting rounded up as well. And they're getting sentenced to arrest. So do you want to know what triggered this latest round of arrests? If you haven't heard about this is actually kind of wild. So here's what triggered this latest round. One of the convicted officials, a former police commander, actually tore off his ankle monitor, drove to Paraguay, and tried to board a flight to El Salvador using fake documents. Paraguay caught him and sent him back. So the Supreme Court of Brazil said, okay, if one of you is going to run, the rest of you are going to be put under house arrest. So they can't use social media, they can't get visitors, and they can't contact others during investigation. Here is where it gets interesting, though. And I think it's important for us to understand what happened there because of what happened in the United States. So the president initially called the proceedings against Bolsonaro a witch hunt. He raised tariffs, by the way, on Brazilian imports, I guess imports, exports, same context here. And then he put financial sanctions. He put financial sanctions on the judge handling the case, which is pretty wild. Anyways, even with all that pressure, Bolsonaro got convicted. Then our president, Trump, backed down. He lowered the tariffs, and the Treasury lifted the sanctions. Why am I telling this? Because it shows something pretty crucial. Accountability is possible. Even when the most powerful person in the world is running interference for an authoritarian trying to hold on to power, the justice system in the United States and internationally can work. There are people who believe and who can do the right thing and hold people accountable. Brazil, by the way, reinstated its democracy in 1985 after decades of military rule. They remember what it looks like when democracy dies. So they are not playing games. So when someone tried to steal that democracy from them, guess what? They went to prison. When people tried to help or to flee, guess what? They went to prison. That is what accountability looks like. When you try to steal democracy from the people who need it most, there should be accountability. There should be. And Brazil is not messing around. Of course, there are unfounded accusations that Jair Bolsonaro also tried to recently escape and that he tried to contact the Trump administration to effectuate his escape. But for now, we know that that was not successful. Welcome to the Ignition News. It's good to have you. If you're new to the show, it is available on all of your favorite platforms. We have a few news stories to talk about. We're going to get on to section 3. But before I do that, I want to let you know that this show, the Ignition News, is sponsored by our signature podcast, Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. If you're wondering, how do I get involved in my community? What do I do? How can I push back against this authoritarianism? Or even just how do I hold my school board accountable? Or how do I fix the pothole down the street? Well, Ignite is a literal step-by-step guide for you to fight for your democracy. With 12 signature episodes and 3 bonus episodes, Ignite takes you how to get off the couch and get into action in your community to be one of our 1,000 leaders in 1,000 different communities. So go ahead and search Ignite, Fighting Fascism. You'll find 12 amazing episodes, 3 bonus episodes, and there's a brand new episode out yesterday, which is a special message to the American resistance. We're getting ready for season 2 of Ignite. We have a lot of really good content that we're going to be putting out, as well as continuing our daily updates here to the news. So let's get on with it. Please consider downloading and following Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise, the sponsor of our show. Well, let's talk about, obviously, the creeping authoritarianism in the United States. Do you remember when on the campaign trail, the president very specifically said that he had nothing to do with Project 2025? Do you remember when people around the president kept saying, oh, this is just the Heritage Foundation. It doesn't have anything to do with our agenda, anything about that? Yeah. Okay. So we've been tracking, obviously, the progress of Project 2025, and it's pretty massive. They have accomplished now over half of what they set out to do with Project 2025's agenda. I do want to kind of talk through some of what they have accomplished. So first, on LGBTQ plus rights, they purged federal health agencies of data on transgender people. The CDC was ordered to scrub mentions of gender identity from research papers. They reversed a Biden-era non-discrimination protection on the very first day. They banned transgender people from military service. They removed trans and gay students from Title IX protections. In the federal workforce, Trump reinstated Schedule F, which reclassifies 50,000 federal employees as at will. That makes it easier for them to get fired. Over 317,000 employees have lost their job. That number is actually all over the place because the government is so bad at tracking that data right now. Think about that for a second. The government is failing to track accurately how many of its own employees it has terminated and fired. That's insane. That's how badly the government is running right now. We don't actually know the total number of federal employees because the government is so dysfunctional right now that it's not accurately tracking that number. So imagine what that means for important things for you that need to get tracked. It's actually pretty scary. But that's not all. Of course, they gutted DEI programs across agencies all over the country, and they're actually punishing people who participated in these programs. On abortion, they're calling for the Department of Health and Human Services to return to being known as the Department of Life. God. They've implemented about 40% of Project 2025's abortion-related policies, despite the president saying he would leave it to the states. And here's the personnel connection that I think everybody knows, but I want to make sure if you're not aware that you are aware of. Russell Vought is one of the key architects of Project 2025. Really one of the figureheads of Project 2020. Remember, Trump said, we have no idea what's going on with Project 2025. Okay, well, Russell Vought runs the OMB. That's the Office of Management and Budget, okay? That's really the epicenter of, it's like the middle of the spiral for the government, right? But you've also got Brendan Carr, who runs the FCC. And so even though they try to distance themselves from Project 2025, they are effectively implementing it. And I think it's important to talk about this, of course, because when they lied about that, they're going to keep lying about everything else. And the point is they're really not done. The 920-page Project 2025 document is really just a blueprint. And whatever they say, I want to let you know. I know a lot of us aren't really tracking this, but they are literally ticking their way through that project. So again, they're more than halfway through it. It's definitely connected. And you've got, really 4 of Trump's top officials, basically the architects of Project 2025. The reason I'm telling you this, the reason we're talking about it on the Ignition News is the document is public, okay? They told us who they were. Knowledge is power. This is the kind of information you can't deny your knowledge, or you can't deny your ability to know about this. You need to go look at the document, read it, download it, make sure you have a copy of it, make sure you're able to effectively talk about it. Next on the Ignition News, let's talk about the output of all this. So we talked about the fact that they're doing this, yes, but let's talk about what that actually means, okay? With all of the chaos that's been wrought on our federal government, it is not without consequence. I want to tell you about something that I saw today that I think is pretty substantial, and it's really the infighting in the Republican Party. Quick little piece on this, because it is actually pretty important, okay? 2 top Republican senators, Rand Paul and Lindsey Graham, have both refused to endorse J.D. Vance's 2028 presidential run. Again, I think it's crazy that we're even talking about J.D. Vance, Mr. Couchman, running for president right now, 2028, when they have so bungled the first year of this American presidency, the 47 project, if you will. But in case you haven't noticed, the billionaires are really actively pushing for J.D. Vance. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, this is pretty normal in politics. It's only the first year. It shouldn't surprise me that no one's endorsing JD Vance. Friends, the billionaires want JD Vance. For some reason, they're all in on JD Vance. Obviously, they want to take all the things that this president broke about American democracy, all the strings that they pulled, and give all that power to Vance, who's going to act on behalf of the billionaires. But before we think this is just standard political jockeying, by the way, listen to what Rand Paul actually said about it. This is a quote from ABC News. I think there needs to be representatives in the GOP who still believe international trade is good, who still believe in free market capitalism, who still believe in low taxes. And when he was asked if Mr. Couch fits that description, and Paul said no. Lindsey Graham completely dodged the question, by the way. So why does that matter? It's because the Republican Party was a monolith. And the monolith and the filter and what the Republican Party was is quite simple. It was Donald Trump's party. That's what it was. That is fracturing because a lot of people are starting to see beyond the sort of cliff of what happens after 2028, and they see that the future is going to be quite different, and nobody has the ability to capture what Donald Trump has the ability to capture in terms of his audience. And so everything is really starting to fracture, okay? Why is that important? Well, it means if you want something other than this constant chaos, we need to encourage and take advantage of this moment and build our own American resistance network. It's not going to be the Democrats. Candidly, the Democratic Party establishment sucks. They're not doing anything. They're beholden to Israel. They are unable to speak out against AIPAC. the same organization which, by the way, funded Donald Trump as much as Elon Musk. So don't wait for Chuck Schumer to come save you. Don't wait for Hakeem Jeffries to come save you. This is the work that we have to do right now. The reason I'm telling you this is because there are fissures, fractures, and cracks in this monolith. It's big. And for everything you want to say about everyone left of the red hat, there is kind of a monolith still there, which is we don't want this terrible regime anymore. So we should take advantage of that. We should organize and we should make sure that we do our best to restore those values. Thanks, everybody, for following along to The Ignition News. The show is published every day. It's a quick segment of the news you need to know. Please consider following The Ignition News on all of your favorite podcast platforms. If you type The Ignition News into your search bar, you're going to find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Substack. And it matters. Please consider supporting the show so that we can continue to deliver this news and these updates. We are broadcasting live on TikTok. I want to say hi to everyone over there on TikTok. It's good to see you. Let's continue with segment 5. Let's talk about FEMA, actually. This is an important story because with all the chaos in America, I do want to make sure that you know that there is a real consequence to the actual people sitting in their homes right now, many who do not have a roof over their heads. You probably remember Hurricane Helene that was in North Carolina. And this should make you angry. It makes me angry just talking about it. So when Hurricane Helene hit North Carolina, about, I want to say, 600 people submitted FEMA buyouts, okay? FEMA buyouts are basically exactly what they sound like. They're supposed to support people whose homes were destroyed. So 600 people approximately submitted buyouts because their home was destroyed by the hurricane. Do you want to guess how many have been approved by the federal government, by FEMA? Zero. Zero applications have been approved. This was 483 days ago that this happened. Not a single application has been approved. So I'm going to share with you some stories about this. Elizabeth Clark, a neonatal nurse who owes $270,000 on a house that is no longer safe to live in. Her mortgage company paused payments for a year, but now they're like, we got to get our money. So you have a 42-year-old who owes $270,000 on her house that she literally can't live in, and FEMA's not processing the paperwork. What's their excuse? What's FEMA's excuse? Most of what FEMA is saying is that the applications don't meet the, quote, open space requirements. And this is that properties have to remain open green space forever once bought out. But North Carolina's Director of Emergency Management says they don't have anything from FEMA officially saying that these applications are ineligible. Here's what's actually happening. FEMA is stalling. That is what's happening. Now, what we don't know is FEMA stalling because they're incompetent? Is FEMA stalling because they don't have money now because they redirected that money to something else? Like, for example, paying ICE agents during a government shutdown? Whether it's deliberate or whether it's incompetence doesn't really matter. It's unacceptable. I think regardless of your political party, we certainly can all agree that there are 600 people who did everything they were supposed to do. They got a house. So many Americans right now can't even afford or think or dream of the idea of owning a home right now. And people who've literally put everything on the line, clearly overextending themselves, which is what most Americans have to do to buy a house, just to be very candid with you. And they buy a house, something happens completely out of their control. Their home is completely destroyed. They've paid their taxes. They've done everything they're supposed to do. And now no one's pulling any triggers. No one is doing anything. So you have all these people who've been financially devastated and destroyed. And here's the kicker, by the way. FEMA set aside $1.5 billion for the hazard mitigation program, but none of it has gone to buyouts. They gave $466,000 to one town and $600,000 to another town for planning costs. Planning costs. What are they planning for 600 people to be homeless? This is your government, by the way. This is what it looks like when corruption and bureaucracy get in the way. And this is not something that this administration can blame on Joe Biden, which is their default right now. This was 483 days ago. It doesn't matter who was president when this happened. What matters is Donald Trump is the president now, and there are 600 plus families whose homes were devastated. They cannot live in those homes, and the federal government's failing to help them. It's a disgrace. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ignition News. This is your daily, unfiltered news channel for you to get the quick updates, to understand what's happening in the country, to be equipped to protect your democracy, to know what's going on in your neighborhood, and to be unfiltered and uncensored. The billionaires are purchasing all of the media in the United States of America. Wait till you see what David Ellison has planned for TikTok or CBS. Wait till you see what's going to happen with Meta. Wait till you see what happens with ABC, NBC, CBS. Quick side note, by the way. One of the reasons we launched the Ignition News is I was doing some research and going back to what were the old days of news. By the way, what ABC, CBS, NBC. Those channels were formed back in the day when your grandparents would turn on the TV. There was basically 3 channels, and they were on public airways. They were public airways. Okay, those companies were entrusted with that public spectrum, that public space, to do and provide news, commentary, and entertainment in the public interest. That's why that was there. Your government created and owns that spectrum, those channels that they're supposed to be broadcasting on. Well, in less than 100 years, what happened with that is the billionaires capitulated. They own everything now. They've bought it, and they've removed themselves from any version of accountability. They've removed themselves by obviously bribing politicians, controlling and corrupting the systems. And 50 years ago, 65 years ago, 75 years ago, on a public news spectrum channel like ABC, CBS, or I keep messing up these acronyms, NBC, if someone had had the audacity to go on the nightly news, CBS, and punt a critical story about something happening in this country, yes, that station would have lost their license. They would have been taken off the air. It would have been handed over to someone more responsible. But now, when that happens, those billionaires are rewarded. Now, when a billionaire punts a critical story about the president of the United States, there's no outcry, there's no screaming, there's nothing except capitulation and congratulations. All you have to do if you want to own a news channel in the United States of America is go make a golden Trump trophy, spray paint it gold. I don't even think it actually matters. Go to the White House, get on your knees, and talk about how everything's going so great. Well, that's why we created the Ignition News. We are not bought by billionaires. We will never be bought by billionaires. We're supported, funded, operated with your support. So thank you for continuing to support us. But I'm going to make that ask now. You got to follow the show. You got to comment on the show. You got to find us everywhere we are. And let's keep going. Let's get to some good news, right? Story number 6. Here's a quick politics update. You know, we love Mamdani on the Ignition News. We love some Zoran Mamdani. We're talking about Mr. Zoran Mamdani, Democratic Socialist. He's about to take office. January 1st, he's going to take office. Mamdani's going to get sworn in by Bernie Sanders. That's amazing. That itself is great news. Can you imagine? Bernie Sanders swearing in the first Democratic Socialist mayor. What a time to be alive. But Mamdani's getting a lot of criticism right now. He actually appointed someone as FDNY Commissioner, Lilian Bonsignore. She is a 31-year-old FDNY veteran, and she was the first woman to achieve 4-star rank in department history. And she led an emergency management services, by the way, through COVID. So this is what they're talking about. This is why they scream and kick and holler. Here's this eminently qualified 31-year veteran, amazing, strong, intelligent woman. This is an easy pick, okay? This is not even a question. Well, guess who weighs in? Elonia. Elonia chimes in. Elon Musk immediately attacked the appointment on his Nazi hate site. He said, "People will die because of this. Proven experience matters when lives are at stake." Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? So, Mamdani is not backing down, especially to that ketamine-addicted billionaire. He said, experience does matter, which is why I appointed the person who spent more than 30 years at EMS. You know, the workforce that addresses at least 70% of the calls coming in to FDNY. But this is not about FDNY, folks. This is not about FDNY, okay? It's about a billionaire trying to undermine a democratic socialist. That's what this is about. Anything that Mamdani or his administration does is constantly going to be under attack from the billionaires, from AIPAC, from the corrupt establishment. That's just a fact. It is crucial that they kneecap this mayoral administration. Because any smidgen of success, any growth, any opportunity, anything that is better completely undermines this rotten, corrupted system of ours. So any small bit of success. And what's sad about it, and while we'll close out the story what's sad about it is these terrible people, these billionaires who have done nothing other than steal. You do not become a billionaire by working. You become a billionaire by stealing from the working class. So all these weak little men, which, side note, by the way, how is it that all of America's billionaires have amassed all this power and wealth, and not fucking one of them can ever manage to look cool in any fucking possible way? How is this possible? They're literally sitting on top of all this gold like a bunch of dragons, and they all just they have no drip. They have no riz. I don't know. It's a side note. My point is, they're completely willing to tear down an absolute icon. 31 years. 31 years this person has been serving. Working in government is not a fun job most of the time. Okay? 31 years of your life. I'm on the commentary section. I need to get off this and get to the news. 31 years of your life times 365 days plus your leap year days. That's so many days serving your government. It's disgraceful that someone's sitting in a hot tub somewhere pissing themselves because they had too much ketamine thinks that they can criticize someone who's dedicated more than half of their life to serving the public. It's disgusting. On to the next story. Welcome, everybody, to the Ignition News. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's following us as we broadcast live on TikTok, but you can't just watch on TikTok, friends. You got to follow the show on Substack, Spotify, YouTube. And again, I'll mention that this podcast is sponsored by Ignite, Fighting Fascism in the Age of Its Rise. So we talked about North Carolina and the 600 plus people who are waiting for FEMA to do literally anything. But let's also talk about another catastrophic housing policy. That's the 50-year mortgage. It's actually going to make the housing crisis much worse. Let's talk about it. The president's pushing 50-year mortgages as a solution to affordability. Now, I covered this extensively in a different segment, but the reality is a 50-year mortgage takes your payment down by something like $200 a month, but it ends up adding almost $500,000 more interest to save you $200 more a month. I'll bring this up for another show because I want to make sure I get the numbers actually right, but a 50-year is basically what it's going to do. Anyways, so what they're trying to basically do is they're trying to have a victory and say like, oh, we lowered all these mortgage payments. But the thing about it, as I just said, is you're going to pay about twice as much interest over your life. Oh, actually, okay. I actually have the calculations right here. So let's take a look at the difference, okay? On a 30-year mortgage, on a $400,000 mortgage, you're going to pay $359,000 in interest. On a 50-year mortgage, you're going to pay $700,000 in interest. And you're going to spend the first 10 years of having that house basically just paying interest. So it's nothing about making anything more affordable. This is about keeping the real estate industry in business. This is about trapping people in generational debt. One of the things that allowed the boomers, one of the things that allowed the greatest generation to prosper in this country is they became wealthy because of their home ownership. Okay? 1 in 10 Americans right now, this is a stat we need to verify, but I just heard this stat the other day. 1 in 10 Americans is a millionaire. Well, they say this. Why do they say this, by the way? That's because of home ownership, because those homes are worth $1 million. Most of those people, they're millionaires because of their home. So if we want to actually make housing more affordable, what we have to do is build more houses. That's the solution to making housing affordable. And I'll just zoom out. Here on the Ignition News, we broadcast live from Las Vegas, Nevada. And something that's really not being covered enough, it's happening in Las Vegas, but it's also happening all over the country, is because of mortgage rates, insurance rates, all those things, home builders have essentially decided that it's not profitable enough to build houses right now. So like in Las Vegas, as an example, they've essentially stopped building new houses or slowed down quite a bit, by the way. And you really have to pull that apart, because what you realize when you pull that apart is not that the housing market is bad, because people want houses. Like that's clearly something people want. People want to own their home. What's crazy when you pull the hood back is you realize these fuckers are making so much money building these houses right now that they can actually stop building houses. It is more in their financial interest to stop building houses so they can continue to extort people by charging these insane prices for houses. That's just, again, I don't know that I'm like explaining this well enough. Like it just blows my mind. What I'm trying to say, these builders make so much money building homes that they can literally stop building homes because it is more in their financial interest to just stop building homes to protect their bottom line rather than continue to build homes and make them more affordable for the rest of us. Anyways, thanks everybody. It's a longer show today. It's because I got up early. Got more stories. Well, everybody, it's about that time. We've got just one more story here on the Ignition News. Before we get to that story, I do want to ask you to go ahead and consider following the show on your favorite podcast platform, as well as commenting, liking, doing all that stuff. It really does matter. It helps out quite a bit. I do want to end the show today talking about an act of American resistance. It's scary, but it also talks about what people can do in those moments of fear. Here's what happens when science meets authoritarianism. Our last story of the day is about the CDC. And really, it's scary, but there's a story of resistance here. So, Dr. John Weiser, an HIV expert at the CDC, was told to scrub data on transgender people from research papers, not to suppress the conclusions, but to really just delete people from the research entirely. He was working on a story about people with HIV who misuse opioids. They found, by the way, that transgender people with HIV who misused opioids had specific needs that were not being met. Now, obviously, this information is pretty important in terms of how do you treat this? How do you handle things like opioid abuse? And everyone, every person, every group has different responses and reactions to these types of things. That information could have really changed clinical practice, the front line, if you will. So the CDC told him to remove all of that data. It said, take out all of the data about transgender people from the study. Imagine that. That is literally erasing people. I don't want to sidestep what's happening there. That's literally erasing people and their medical care. But he refused to do that. He resigned. Here's what he had to say. I thought about my transgender patients and how I would face them, knowing that I had erased their existence from the CDC. So think about what this means. This is the government ordering scientists to pretend that entire groups of people don't exist. Not because the science is not good science, right? Not because his methodology is wrong, but it's just because the administration doesn't like transgender people. It's just blatantly obvious. And Dr. Weiser points out the obvious next step, and this is kind of where the reason we're covering this story, okay? If it's okay to remove information about gender, what if it's the next thing we're not talking about the homeless? What if we're not talking about Black individuals? What if we're not talking about women, right? This is how it starts. If you can pull one group out of science, you can pull another group, another group, another group. This is not so much authoritarianism, by the way. This is straight Christian nationalism. That's what it is. This is the clearest example that our flavor of authoritarianism in the United States is not like anything that's come before it. It's white American Christian nationalism. And the way that white American Christian nationalism grows is by denying and suppressing the existence of all of those other groups. That's actually, by the way, the only way it grows. The CDC went along with it, and they hoped that compliance would save other programs, but it didn't. The Medical Monitoring Project, 20 years of HIV research, got shut down anyway. The administration might actually eliminate all HIV prevention and surveillance funding. And, this is not good. It's not a good story, but it's a good example of resistance. Dr. Weiss resigned. He publicly talked about his resignation. And that, my friends, is what resistance looks like in practice. Before we get to the actual final story of the day, I just have to pause and separate and say, resisting fascism, resisting Christian nationalism, a lot of you think that it's fun and easy. And I'm not trying to be critical here, but a lot of you think that it's just fun and easy to do. Like, yay, let's go to a protest, have a funny sign, right? Sometimes resistance has enormous personal cost. Sometimes it means you lose your job. Sometimes it means you lose your family. Sometimes it means you lose your house. But you have to think about all the other people. If one person stays silent and thousands of people are deleted from existence, there is nothing, no property, no money, no value that you can justify with that. None. And our final story today, everybody, on the Ignition News is about Mexico. Mexico is benefiting from Trump's tariffs. Despite his threats, American exports to the U.S. actually increased 6.3% in the first half of 2025. They remain America's largest trading partner. The complicated part, though, is 85% of Mexican exports enter duty-free if they comply with the USMCA. The other 15% are getting hit with 25% tariffs, with threats of 30% tariffs if they aren't reached. So obviously this is creating a lot of chaos in the supply chains. Companies who are exporting don't know which rule is going to apply to them today or tomorrow, which means that investors are not backing those things, okay? This is called nearshoring, obviously. So who gets hurt in this? Well, workers on both sides of the Mexican and American border get hurt by this, consumers get hurt by this, and small businesses cannot absorb those tariff costs. Who benefits? Really nobody. Companies that thought they might benefit from bringing manufacturing back are finding out that you can't just rebuild whole entire supply chains, right? So this is governance by tantrum. It's government by true social, and it destroys predictability. Markets, trade markets, they need predictability. Workers need predictability. And you really can't plan entire supply chains based on someone's moods. But the reality is, in spite of all this attempt, Mexico's benefiting. Their trade is actually up. So, what connects all the stories we talked about today on the Ignition News? And that is one thing: power acting without accountability, governments serving the interests of people, institutions failing to meet the moment. That's why we launched the Ignition News, to deliver the truth, the stories you need to know that you can take out into your day, your family, your community, and you can hold this administration accountable. That's it today. This is our longest episode yet of the Ignition News. This is what happens when I get up early, by the way. We had a lot of very important stories. And what we are documenting in real time, what the rest of the media is not willing to document, is the failure of this administration, the incompetence of this administration. But what's scary is it's sort of like a bulldozer without brakes that you push downhill, right? It's not doing what it's designed to do, obviously, but it's still kind of like a bulldozer going downhill without brakes. It's causing an enormous amount of damage. And what happens is the back end of all of that damage, the billionaires, the special interest groups come in, and they rebuild what they want to rebuild, not what is good for you and your community. That's why we are building an unbiased, uncensored news source here on The Ignition News. If you're looking where to find us on all of your favorite platforms, here's what you're going to do. Go to theignition.news. Follow us on your favorite platform. We'll see you back tomorrow for the truth on The Ignition News. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great Sunday.